The best stretch of Bleach is often contested. People who are 30 believe it is Soul Society. Others believe it is the first invasion of Thousand Year Blood War. If you're really crazy, then you might even believe Waco Mundo or the end of Fullbringer is the best stretch. Truthfully, the best stretch is only between two options. Today we'll break down the former option, deicide. This stretch of Bleach is divisive and polarizing in the eyes of many. However, it's continued to be some of the most complex character and thematic structuring in the medium of manga. I encourage people to take this video incredibly seriously and use it as a baseboard to propel your own ideas and interpretations of this story. I love this story and I'm not infallible. I get things wrong sometimes. I hope this video can be an ultimate walkthrough of Bleach's absolute strengths. We have to do substantial groundwork before talking about deicide itself. Understand, deicide is the climax of an entire storyline expanding hundreds of chapters. This means there's a lot of context fueling these 20 or so chapters. Deicide is the final confrontation between Ichigo and Aizen. We will explore a full thematic analysis of their dynamic later, but this is the most important relationship in this stretch. Not only Aizen but Gin, not just Ichigo but Kisuke. These characters play an integral role that shape your very understanding of the stretch. Important context is naturally the Espada. These undead creatures banding together all in the survival of the fittest is the core of the group dynamic. There is no sense of camaraderie they mutually feel. This is because Aizen has sculpted them to his own will. Feelings of despair, solitude, and nihilism are all intrinsic to Aizen, in which he projects onto Ichigo, who inevitably internalizes it. Like it or not, the Espada play a very interesting and, in my opinion, fascinating role in the framework of the Arrancar saga. I have shed this light in another video, but I believe Aizen making the Espada is an inward contradiction, someone he can connect to, so he makes the Espada. Multiple generations actually. Connecting with others and becoming God are entirely mutually exclusive. This is thematically consistent as components can be found within Aizen's characterization in general. Multiple parallels either thematically or otherwise. I say all this to hammer home that we have seen Aizen entirely throughout the Espada. We have a lens to view Aizen before he does anything notable. As Aizen cuts down the Espada and attempts to fight the Gotai, he sheds his skin of Shinigami. This is shown quite literally with Aizen claiming to be the ruler of Arrancars. However, more than that, the Hogyoku fixes its shape to conform to Aizen, forcibly going beyond Shinigami. My intent is not ever to say plot information in just a pedantic way. I don't like saying things that everyone knows and acknowledges, such as Aizen wanted the Hogyoku. What's the Hogyoku? It is the MacGuffin made by Kisuke Urahara over 100 years ago. I don't like saying these things, and I think recapping the plot just lags the video. For the sake of brevity and context, I'll air out these events that have led us directly into deicide. This is because deicide isn't a special stretch of chapters that are intimately structured like the Lust chapters or Everything But the Rain. If it was the Lust chapters, there would be no semblance of a recap, but may death be kinder than man. Aizen, pulling the strings per usual, traps Ichigo inside of Waco Mundo and meets the Gotai's bluff of fighting in Fate Katakura Town. Aizen is trapped under threat of Yamamoto while his underlings attempt to break Fate Katakura Town apart. As they fail, the Espada rise in action to defeat the captains and to go to the real Katakura Town. After his top two are defeated, Aizen grows bored and simply handles business himself. He proceeds to absolutely decimate the Gotai, and I mean, oh my god. People say Kaido and Sukuna ran the gauntlet, but they have never done it like this. Sukuna and Kaido were trolling and holding back the entire time. Aizen is trolling by saying our definitions of power are fundamentally different. Aizen holding back is allowing Shinji to use his Shikai, just to show how it is simply a parlor trick against him. After this, Aizen fights Yamamoto, and his contingency plan against the strongest Soul Reaper ever works out. He forces Yamamoto to sacrifice his own arm in order to not nuke the entire area, cutting Yamamoto's power in half. Yamamoto lands an attack on Aizen and Ichigo capitalizes by delivering a devastating blow. Aizen then taunts Ichigo while we get some delicious foreshadowing. Immediately, Isshin comes and intervenes during their confrontation, and this is what catches us up to deicide. Gin and Ichigo are fighting while Isshin and Aizen are doing the same. It is important that these battles are parallels in all sense of the word, but I am getting beyond myself. It is not frightening to know misfortune. What is frightening is to know lost happiness will never come back. As you can see, this stretch opens up with Gin versus Ichigo and Aizen versus Isshin. As I said, these fights are paralleled. The parallels that exist are pretty interesting when you take a holistic look at the series. One parallel manifests when you look at how these fights are technically rematches. Isshin already fought Aizen, just without his knowledge. Same for Gin and Ichigo. The creative writing here is that Ichigo and Isshin both believe that this is their first time fighting their opponents. Like I said, Isshin did not know it was Aizen, and this is a one-to-one with Ichigo not knowing he was fighting Gin. The audience is supposed to naturally go, Ichigo, are you tweaking off the yak? How do you not remember him? Ichigo then explains that when he fights someone, he usually remembers them by feeling their heart. He is able to sense his opponents on a spiritual level, and when fighting Gin, he wasn't feeling that at all. This right here is some clever foreshadowing that recontextualizes so many points from Ichigo. This makes his sympathy for Renji all the more clear. This makes his frustration at Ukiura's death a lot more whole. This also spins his hallucination of Kenpachi differently. This means the fake Kenpachi has the real ideals of him. This one line from Ichigo carries so much weight for the future and past of Bleach. Another parallel is how Gin and Aizen are lying to themselves. Not some Eren lying to himself in his own head, but actually lying. Gin is lying in an attempt to save Rangiku. He's putting on a mask to himself and to others to try to get back a part of Rangiku. She never asked for any of that, and it's very much hard to believe he actually thought she cared about that. Aizen is lying in a more nuanced sense. Aizen is a character whose motivations are inherently contradictory and fraudulent. He makes the Espada fight even though he could decimate the Gotai anytime he wanted. He wants to become God, but we see at the very end this isn't true. This really wasn't the case. There are many angles to these characters' duplicity, but the magnificent part of it all is how Ichigo is one to admonish and reprimand these lies. Ichigo is a sun that removes the shadow of fraudulence and ignorance. There are more parallels I will dive into in time to show how the structure of this is surprisingly very well crafted. As deicide opens up, we get some great choreography and cinematography. Gin shortly tells Ichigo about his Zanpakuto. He tells Ichigo that his Shikai can stretch about 100 sword lengths, but then adds how the Bankai can go 13 meters. Naturally, all of this is a lie. Gin's intentions are to mislead and test Ichigo's abilities. We get some crazy good art during this chapter that just shows how Kubo's fights will always look good no matter the weather. Ichigo deflects Gin's attacks and counters with his own. Gin is elated by this reality. We will naturally dive into this a lot more later. These subtle nuances between what Gin chooses and does not choose to do ties his character together in the end and the thematic thread he's intrinsically linked to. He then pushes Ichigo further and gives him another test of how he is a combatant. He retracts his sword to see if Ichigo can figure out his gimmick without being told. Once Ichigo figures it out, Gin starts pressing him even further because at this state he still isn't ready. We cut to Aizen and Isshin's battle, in which we learn some important details for the past and future of the story. As Aizen begins to morph into something beyond Shinigami, the Hogyoku directly consumes his soul. This is the metaphor for being consumed by your desires and rejecting your very being. Aizen claims the Hogyoku's power is to read and materialize the desires inside the hearts of those around it. Everything that has been brought out was simply because of the Hogyoku's power. Aizen then tells us that Kisuke mistook the Hogyoku's true nature because those were his desires. The Hogyoku's power also transferred all of Rukia's power to Ichigo because she was disillusioned with being a Soul Reaper after killing Kai and Shiba. Chad and Orihime had unlocked their powers because deep inside their heart was an insatiable desire to no longer be powerless. While some of these explanations and recontextualizations can be contested, the overall point he makes is that humans want there to be a change in their life somehow, in some way. We all try to grab at the moon but are unable to. It is the Hogyoku that bridges that gap completely. As Aizen begins being reshaped into something more divine, the man behind these events arrives, Kisuke Urahara. Kisuke says it's been a long time since they last saw each other, and that Aizen now takes a strange look. Aizen says the process of evolution is usually ugly, and Kisuke corrects him, saying he didn't say it was ugly. These pieces of dialogue are pretty interesting as it shows how Aizen has this preconceived idea about Kisuke that he wants materialized, and almost has this resentment formed from him. It is interesting to explore, but only theoretically right now, as you might get into more headcanon territory. Moreover, following this dialogue, we get some strange action pieces. Kisuke uses a shadow clone after Aizen attempts to speed blitz him. Then Kisuke uses multiple Kido spells to subdue and destroy Aizen. Instead, this naturally does not work and Aizen appears right behind him to deliver a blow to his chest. Instead, Kisuke planned for this to happen and facilitated Aizen being burnt away by spirit energy vents on his wrists. Kisuke also expected Aizen not to die from this attack. Kisuke and Isshin attack Aizen at the same time and prepare for Yoriichi to attack as well. Aizen easily recovers and tells the three of them to keep coming up with plans, as each plan is a glimmer of hope they have, and it is his responsibility to crush that hope itself. As Aizen continues to fight, Ichigo looks more and more worried. Gin taunts him and tells him how that Aizen has now evolved to a state in which they're all going to die. Ichigo says he won't allow that to happen, and with the way Aizen is, anything can happen to Gin as well. Gin looks entirely disappointed and says that Ichigo saying that is by itself an admission of defeat. He sounds like he has already given up when he starts thinking of the likelihood of his opponent's safety. This emphasis on Ichigo's mental state is so important for the future of this mini arc. However, as we see Ichigo and Gin fight, we see Rangiku up and running with some urgency. If you became a snake tomorrow and began devouring people, if you roared your love for me with that mouth you used to devour people, could I still say that I love you as I do today? Kisuke, Isshin, and Yoriichi land a combined attack on Aizen that only serves to further his evolution. Gin questions Ichigo even more, asking why she's so weak, why she's so scared, and what could possibly be on his mind to have him so perturbed. Gin finally pieces it together. The reason why he is so scared is because unlike Isshin, himself, and the rest of them, Ichigo can actually sense Aizen's power and just how destructive it is. Aizen soon emerges from his battle and demands that Gin opens the Senkaimon. He tells Ichigo that he is the main dish that will be devoured later. While this happened, his chrysalis stage becomes complete and he can now watch the Soul Society fall with his own eyes. Isshin wakes up and tells Ichigo that it's no time to cry like a bitch because they got people to save. Gin and Aizen begin to walk through the Dongai, and the Kotetsu cleaner comes and forces them to put some pep in their step. Gin urges Aizen that the Kotetsu isn't something a spiritual being can logically comprehend, and Aizen challenges that. He is a character that believes in something formless and envisions something beyond sight completely. The destruction of the Kotetsu is proof of that. The Kotetsu is not bound by spiritual might and is something Gin has only been told. He is still bound at the cliff's edge, unable to step out. Aizen, however, does and completely destroys the cliff alongside him. Reason is but a shield for those who cower behind it. Aizen attempts to go beyond reason, but first he must step to the very edge of reason. He has to break every idea he's been told about the Soul Society to hold a mirror to the broken system and the fragility it holds. Ironically, these motivations are not genuine, nor would they have worked out at all if they were. These different aspects and key details mold the compelling nature of Aizen's character and the role he plays in this mini arc. As Aizen and Gin arrive at the real Karakura town, Ichigo and Isshin arrive in the Dongai and begin to ponder on how to defeat Aizen. Isshin then posits that Ichigo learns the final Getsuga Tensho. Some mechanics about the Dongai and the Zanpato and Ichigo's powers are explained to facilitate the Dongai, but who cares really? The Dongai is a connected space surrounded by a torrent of layers of time. The time density inside the Dongai is heavier compared to outside the Dongai. It is almost 2,000 times denser, meaning every 2,000 years inside the Dongai is essentially a year in the outside world. In ancient times, the Dongai was used for a place of exile, and the Koryu, the gas, will trap you until you died, and Kotetsu will throw you off your time axis. This naturally explains the time discrepancy in the Society, as well as justifies why Kisuke was stressed on how important it was. There's only one way to stop the Koryu, which is called the Kaikyu Kote, and it consumes a lot of spirit energy. While Isshin is holding back the Koryu with the spirit energy, Ichigo must enter Jizen and learn the final Getsuga Tensho within 3 months' time. Anyway, we later see Keigo walking through Kensington, Philadelphia, and he meets up with Toski, but calls her by her last name, which is so interesting because people in Bleach usually say that when they're not close. So I think the joke here is supposed to be like, hey, I'm stuck in we're the last people on Earth, and it's you. But naturally, it doesn't really read like that. All the Karakura gang meet up in some alleyway and they talk about their current conditions. They decide to leave it all up to Ichigo, as he's the type of person who will handle his business even if it's not his business. Here we come to some of the most important and well-written character beats for Ichigo that was a motivator for making this video. Ichigo enters his inner world and what he sees is building sideways and the world entirely submerged. A hooded figure helps Ichigo learn how to breathe. The hooded figure reveals himself to be Ichigo's Bankai. Zangetsu specifically looks this way because this is what Ichigo is projecting onto the blade. White and Old Man Zangetsu are regular parts of his soul, so this new look is entirely based on his own self-doubt and imperfections that he internalizes. Remember that Ichigo has not had a break physically, mentally, or emotionally since the start of the Wake Up Mundo arc. This fatigue, frustration, and angst built up to be almost his childlike version of Zangetsu. Ichigo intrinsically and subconsciously knows the final Getsuga Tensho and the effects of such a thing. The same way Ichigo is able to use a Getsuga Tensho without knowing the name. He did it entirely subconsciously. The same thing for the Sonito shit in 1000-Year Blood War. These things are a part of his soul whether he likes it or not. This Zangetsu says he will not teach him the final Getsuga Tensho, and that he does not care about what happens to the thing Ichigo wants to protect. He firmly states that the things Ichigo wants to protect are not the things he wants to protect. Zangetsu says it is Ichigo who has lost all hope and stopped moving forward that caused his world to sink into the ocean. Zangetsu pulls out the depths of Ichigo's despair, which turns out to be white itself. One of the reasons behind Ichigo's mental battles is the destruction he can cause during his hollow form. This had been eating him away, which is why he cannot properly mask up while fighting Yami, and neglected to mask while fighting Aizen. He became entirely afraid of his own power, subsequently making him fail in using it. Zangetsu then says that Ichigo will be fighting the both of them, and as they fuse, we get what One Piece fans would call foreshadowing, but I'll just say really cool stuff. Meanwhile, we get some classic Kubo trolling. Aizen attempts to kill Ichigo's friends to motivate him to be stronger, but is soon stopped by the man, the myth, the bum, Don Kanoji. I know Bleach fans like to comically glaze this man, but he should have been actually deleted after the first arc. He had a nice character beat and thematic little arc stuff, but come on. We do get this awful panel of Aizen though. Don Kanoji is about to get his shit stuff when our favorite voluptuous, vivacious vixen, Rangiku, shows up just in time. Gin takes Rangiku away to a random building. Rangiku starts questioning Gin's motivations, like joining Aizen and abandoning Kiro. Gin questions how much she knows about what she's talking about. He then calls her a nuisance, and then boom. Later, we unfortunately get a moment in Bleach I have not seen a proper defense for. Keigo begins to hold a Soul Reaper Zanpakuto, but this seems especially odd, like it just shouldn't happen. Some random, slightly spiritually aware dude picking up an entire Zanpakuto? It just seems wrong. Even worse, Keigo says he can feel Aizen getting closer. How can Keigo feel Aizen at all when Ishin couldn't? The mechanics of Bleach have never been super tight, but these two moments definitely feel out of place. Aizen then goes after the Karakuri gang, in which he is interrupted by Gin. People are all imitations of monkeys. Gods are all imitations of humans. The beginning of this volume has a cover of Gin holding a mask to him, symbolically finally taking off the mask he puts on. I love almost all chapter title reveals, but this one especially is cool. Kubo really likes drawing these. As Gin returns, Aizen asks Gin what did he do to Rangiku. Gin says that he killed her. Aizen confirms her spirit energy is indeed gone, but looks skeptical. Aizen is surprised that he can kill her, but Gin soon confirms who he is. Gin says he is a snake who devours those he cares about. This line is very revealing, though, as we just heard. This line shows Aizen in the audience that he does care about people like Kira Rangiku. Gin shortly asks Aizen what happens after they kill the Karakuri gang, and Aizen answers naturally with the creation of the Hoken. Gin says if that's the case, he will kill the kids himself. As he says this, he puts his hand on Aizen's Zanpakuto. Aizen looks shocked. Immediately after, Gin sinks his blade into Aizen's chest. This was the moment Gin was waiting for. Touching Kyoka Suigetsu is the only counter to its hypnosis. Gin reveals his Bankai's real ability to leave a part of the blade inside a target to then explode it from the inside with a cellular destroying poison. Gin then says the ruler of Arrancars should be happy to die with the hole in his chest, just like his subject. This line is layered in the sense of he does not explicitly say this, but all implies that he is no better than his subordinates. This, of course, is contextualized with Aizen almost dying here by his most trusted subordinate. The following chapter has some absolutely beautiful artwork concerning Gin and Aizen's relationship to each other. Like, I mean, you don't see this slow type of pace detail art style in manga anymore. Without any words, it just reads so poetically. I don't mean to glaze it so badly, but I'm always so impressed with these chapters. We soon see Aizen kill Gin while thanking him for pushing him to another point of evolution. Rangiku comes to Gin on his deathbed, crying and being thankful that he was able to tell her he was sorry. He laments that he was unable to get back what Aizen took from her. Aizen stands over a crying Rangiku, dead Gin, and barely conscious Tatsuki crew. He plots his next move as Ichigo arrives. Ichigo checks if his sisters are alright, and then he tells everyone it's all over and that everything will be alright. Gin takes one look at Ichigo and is thankful that he can die and leave Rangiku's fate to him. Aizen asks Ichigo if this is the true Ichigo. Ichigo cuts Aizen off to then tell him that they're going to fight somewhere else. Ichigo carries Aizen off into the distance so they can fight and end this conflict. Aizen concludes that Ichigo traded all his spirit energy for physical strength, and that is how he was able to apparently temporarily overpower Aizen for that moment. Aizen teleports behind Ichigo to strike him, but Ichigo notices and easily counters. This interaction makes the mountain completely disappear. Mini power scaling moment. This isn't some Kaido Big Mom are going to destroy Onigashima moment. Just as we saw earlier with Mizuhiro throwing shit at Aizen, Aizen is impressed with the casual swing of the sword. The casual swing of his blade could just manipulate the environment. We later see how this is something he takes pride in as well. This is not Aizen being impressed with a mountain level feat, just like how Ichigo isn't shocked purely based on Mach 500. They're surprised and impressed, etc. simply because something like that can happen so easily without trying. Had to clear that up because people think Bleach in the enormous 2027 is barely mountain level. Aizen then goes to attack Ichigo again, and Ichigo completely catches the attack. Not evades, not blocks, but catches the attack effortlessly. Ichigo taunts him, saying Aizen can't comprehend what is happening in front of him. This makes Aizen enraged. A mere human, someone he basically created, has the goal to look down on him. Aizen then does a fully enchanted Kurohitsugi. I often echo this technique in discussion. Writers make antagonists do special moves, quote unquote, that they can only do that makes them more intimidating. For Kaido, this is Conqueror's coded attacks. For Sukuna, this is an open domain. For Sensui, this is ancient spirit energy. Basically, writers do this to make antagonists feel special and threatening. Their Kurohitsugi was basically this for Aizen, a Hado in the 90s with only half its power capable of one-shotting a captain in Bankai. This is Aizen's special move capable of disorienting space and time. A fully enchanted Kurohitsugi with the giga buffed Aizen, and it does absolutely nothing to Ichigo, and he effortlessly slaps it away. Ichigo slices Aizen across his chest. Aizen retreats momentarily, and Ichigo asks him a question. Why did you back away from me? Why are you keeping your distance from me? If you want to hit me, you'll have to get closer. Or are you afraid to get too close and lose any side of my body? If so, that's silly. Distance only matters between two combatants of equal strength. For you and me, distance is irrelevant. So again, Aizen, why are you backing away? The Hogyoku transforms Aizen once more, and Aizen rationalizes this with the will of the sphere wanting to take revenge on Ichigo. However, as Aizen stated, it is simply his own will materialized, not the Hogyoku's. Aizen launches an attack at Ichigo that seemingly rendered Ichigo's left arm useless. Aizen takes advantage of this and begins to shit-talk Ichigo. Ichigo responds. He resolves to end the fight then and there with the final Getsuga Tensho. We then get a flashback to Ichigo training inside his inner world. He is fighting against Zangetsu and begins to think Zangetsu could have ran away or finished the fight immediately if he did not want to tell Ichigo the secrets of the final Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo asks himself, why does he feel such loneliness coming from his blade? Again, this idea of connecting through swords is shown, but an extra layer is added. As I said earlier, this is all intrinsic to Ichigo. Ichigo is feeling a metaphorical loneliness from himself. He understands he will need to do the final Getsuga Tensho, and this realization makes him deeply lonely. He will be missing an entire part of himself if he unlocks this ability. This is what the following poem is in reference to. I wonder if I can keep up with the speed of a world you're not in. This is made to look like a Ruki Awake, but is instead about Ichigo and these intrinsic parts of his soul. Zangetsu says the final Getsuga Tensho can only be achieved by accepting the blade. Zangetsu says he only wanted to protect Ichigo. Zangetsu's motivations are completely Ichigo-centric, but Ichigo's motivations being being altruistic and conscientious puts these two against each other. Understand, they are one and the same. Ichigo has achieved the final Getsuga Tensho, but has failed to create a balance within himself. This is the poetic tragedy of deicide. Two men trying, searching for an understanding of themselves, going inward and the other going outward. Ichigo uses Mugetsu, moonless sky, the blade that touches the sky and pierces the moon. It touches the moon and cuts the embodiment and the concept of aizen. The problem here is that metaphorically, it erases the moon from the sky. By completely removing it, we remove a fundamental piece of bleach. In bleach, we need the moon to balance the sun. We need the rain to balance the sky. We need the cycle to balance our freedom. Ichigo aimed to remove the moon with this attack, but by doing so, betrayed a core piece of his motivations. We cannot have one without the other. This metaphorical and thematic betrayal manifests within the literal removal of his powers and the further confusion with his identity crisis. Mugetsu starts at the sky, completely slaying the moon, then comes crashing back down to earth, revealing the lack of transcendence and the inabilities of self-acceptance. I substantiate a lot of these thoughts and ideas with Mugetsu Ichigo attempting to draw the symbol of Enso. Enso is a symbol basically meaning self-understanding and acceptance. We see this back in Soul Society where Ichigo understood who he was at that very presenting facet. However, here, the circle is incomplete. Ichigo reached transcendence, but has not come closer to self-understanding. The final chapter of deicide ties together this battle. Hit entirely with Ichigo's strongest attack to date, Aizen still regenerates. As Ichigo loses his power, Aizen says the Hogyoku decided he no longer needs his own plateau, and that he will ascend to far greater heights, a double entendre we will explore later. Aizen says this, then immediately following, he is beginning to be sealed by Kisuke's Kido. Aizen then goes on a long diatribe about his motivations in relation to Kisuke, and then it happens. Ichigo looks away.
Make my shit straight, bitch ass nigga.
Until now, I have talked about and explained deicide in the literal sense. I talk about story beats, what happens, what does it mean, but now it's time for a holistic look at what this stretch means, and of course, most of Fate Katakura in the Arrancar saga. Unlike One Piece, Bleach has a complex thematic framework, which means I can't just list out a bunch of words and phrases and call it a day. The most important idea to recognize during the stretch is bonds. The bond between family, friends, a person, and themselves. Bleach has a very complex thematic framework with a lot of moving pieces to consider. The most consistent and developed idea within this framework related to the stretch is bonds. Everyone has a stake in this mega conflict because of their bonds toward one another. Deicide aims to zero in on this on a macro level. The arcs of Kira and Hisagi attempting to double down on their convictions despite them stemming from the person they are forced to fight is manifested within Ichigo. If all of his battles were really planned by Aizen, then what can he say toward his relationships with Rukia, Kenpachi, and Byakuya? Gin takes these burdens completely by his malicious snake-like nature being the limiter on his own relationship with Rangiku and spawning a crippling loneliness as a result. Now we move to Aizen. His role within this conflict is the most nuanced concerning he has the most staked into his character in virtually every facet. The most ironic writing within this character is despite being connected to every relationship in the series, the distance between him and others is larger than any power level. He is beyond lonely and as a result builds resentment and overwhelming pride in front of the Shinigami. The lack of a bond with others disrupts the bond with himself. How could it not? We see time and time again that connecting with others helps you understand yourself. Orihime to Rukia, Ichigo to Rukia, Renji to Rukia. Man, Rukia is goated. We see this concept the most, and it only stands to reason this facet of Aizen's character is broken to a certain degree. Moreover, analyzing Ichigo holistic with this Arrancar saga is the best way to fully paint and explore the framework during the stretch. From the very start of the saga, Ichigo looks scared. He fears the hollow inside. He's scared to fight and engage in battle as a result. He cannot protect anyone with a broken blade. Nonetheless, he hardens his resolve and hopes to conquer and quell the beast inside him. He does, eventually, but there's a foreboding message about his core motivations and reasoning for doing battle. For himself, for his friend, for enlightenment, Ichigo is challenged again and again for what he fights for, and the more he is challenged, the worse his mental becomes. Those are not the eyes of a victor. Coming to the final battle, Ichigo is again confronted confronted by Aizen. How could he swing a sword out of duty? Surely that will never reach him. Gin then confronts Ichigo and reveals just how weak he really is. His constant struggle of winning physically but losing mentally, not being good enough, not having the proper understanding is the true core of this arc. Ichigo, Aizen, and Gin are all strong physically, but they lack the mental fortitude and resolve to achieve their goals. Bleach is a series that tries to define strength in one's own being with their understanding of themselves. By these characters being strong but lacking the understanding, we reach our core dilemma and thematic conflict. What is one to do when the physical strength they have is simply not enough? Don't get me wrong, physical strength in the Bleach world will take you very far. However, we see all creatures, all beings are just moving forward in fear of death. This is why our trio loses. Gin loses his life, Aizen loses his freedom, and Ichigo loses his powers. These characters unfortunately garner corresponding punishments because of their lack of understanding, not in terms of literal plot, but thematic relevance. If Gin could understand his own nature and appeal to Rangiku's emotions, he could have been there for her. If Aizen could understand the own yearning in his heart, it wouldn't have been sealed and replaced. If Ichigo could tend to the imbalance within his soul, he would still have his Shinigami abilities. For a more layered analysis of this arc and hit almost every beat present, we will now explore the character relationships and dynamics present. Think of this section as a review of the characters themselves. Kisuke and Aizen. These geniuses are defined by their duplicity and prowess. For me, however, I have never really cared much for Kisuke. This is primarily the reason why I call him Kisuke and not Urahara like most people. I like him, like he's cool and stuff, but I've never was really moved by him at any point in time. Nonetheless, he has an incredibly unique relationship with Aizen. An important note is that Aizen projects himself onto Kisuke. Aizen feels inferior to Kisuke for almost arbitrary reasons. Kisuke creating a better Hogyoku is a standard Aizen arbitrarily assigned to make Kisuke look superior in his eyes. This is because Aizen builds a lingering resentment towards him. He is recognized for his genius and praised for it. He looks at Kisuke and goes, "He is smarter than me, but has friends and relationships and things I do not." This makes itself the case when Aizen and Kisuke meet with the mask off and he tells him, "You're exactly the man I thought you were." Aizen is extremely rageful at the biggest cog in the system, Kisuke. Despite his intelligence and ability to do something about the world itself, he remains stagnant. This further infuriates Aizen and makes him go on a diatribe about he is a winner and that Kisuke is a loser. This is ironic in many regards. I've stated in multiple videos now that evolution is simply a metaphor for going past your true self. The only way to truly evolve is to remain the same. Kisuke understands this, and this is why his replies are all in favor of Aizen being rejected by the world, the Hogyoku, and himself. By the way, some people interpret this relationship as a commentary on Plato and Socrates. Even if I believe that, saying shit like that will only make me look like a pretentious dork, so I can't go for that at all. I was gonna write more of this dynamic, but I find it decently hard because Kisuke himself doesn't necessarily interest me, and if I come up with anything else, I'll just put it on the screen.
Hey. What?
Gin and Rangiku. Gin and Rangiku share a very interesting relationship. If you Google anything related to these characters, you will likely not see anything meaningful. This is because their relationship is very difficult to pin down. This is because this relationship is a microcosm of every relationship in the series, not literally, but thematically. A core part of Bleach is tragedy and despair. Characters are haunted by their past, which casts a shadow on their present and makes their future look dark. We see this all over the place with Ichigo and Masaki, Ruki and Kaien, Uryu and Soken, Byakuya and Hisana. Plagued by death and grief, these characters try to soar past it. Gin and Rangiku are especially interesting because they are plagued by each other, despite being alive. Rangiku is looking to protect, Gin is looking to protect and hold their past together. Rangiku holds their memories close and wants to return to their past. This divide is expertly characterized in their poem. I love Bleach poems so much for this very reason. These characters have little screen time, on-screen development, and plot relevance, but their arcs can always feel so profound and well crafted because of these poems. I alluded to their significance within the plot by mentioning it when going over deicide itself. In short, we can reveal and analyze the relationships and how they view each other through these poems. To know sorrow is not terrifying. What is terrifying is to know you can't go back to happiness you could have. When looking at Rangiku within the context of deicide, we can see through the layers of this poem. She understands what suffering is, what sorrow entails. She has faced Gin betraying her and multiple friends opting to kill her or worse. She likens this suffering to something far greater. She says what is terrifying is knowing you can never go back to the way things were. This element of regretting the past is often seen but not really highlighted like the way it is now. I'm sure Rukia could go back to the days where she still had Cyan, and Tosin could go back to the days where his friend was still alive. Rangiku adds an optimistically nihilistic layer to this theme of the story. It is not painful to live through this, it is painful to keep going forward. This naturally ties into the final message of the story, making what I said earlier about Gin and Rangiku being representative of every relationship have a lot more credence. You are becoming a snake tomorrow. As you start to devour people with that mouth that has devoured others, you cry your love for me. And the same as today, I do wonder, will I be able to say my love to you? The snake motif around Gin's character is nothing new. This, however, is the exact reason why we see him in specific instances. Gin is not a snake. This is simply a facade he puts onto others to achieve his goal against Aizen. Gin is not the snake, but he became it nonetheless. In this poem, he asks himself if Rangiku was in his position, what would he do? If Rangiku took this role of abandoning their past and delegating himself to the enemy of the three worlds, could he feel the same way as she does now? Has the snake mask he put on not be a mask at all? If Rangiku was Gin and Gin was her, could he love her? Could he keep the yearning in his own heart as she does? Evidently, no, he cannot, at least in my opinion. This ambiguously asked question is your own to answer, and for me, I decide to say no based on different themes and character motivations. For now, we can see how Gin is questioning how Rangiku can still love him after all they've been through, and this question comes to permeate their final interaction, with Gin not saying a word and leaves his hope onto Ichigo to protect Rangiku and the love she still holds for him. Gin is not a villain of the story, but a misguided, almost tragic hero who abandoned his morals for the woman who brought him happiness. There's some genuine beauty in that, which Rangiku recognizes and is thankful for. Ichigo Aizen. Firstly, let me apologize and thank you for making it to the end. I'm sorry for the following section because it might be a bit more scattershot compared to the last few ones, but allow me to say Ichigo and Aizen are my top 1 protagonist and antagonist. I've spent at least 100 hours discussing them, reading about them, learning about them, and thinking about them individually and as a dynamic. If this section ends up being the longest,
we're gonna know.
If fate is a millstone, then we are the grist. There is nothing we can do, so I wish for strength. If I cannot protect them from the wheel, then give me a strong blade and enough strength to shatter fate. Similar to a lot of shonen MCs, Ichigo Kurosaki is fighting against fate. Expertly crafted through multiple motifs such as the moon, we have been over this. Moons are indicative of cycles. Cycles are one-to-one with fate. Thereby, the moon represents fate. Ichigo's entire drive is built upon shattering fate, touching on the moon. Entirely, this is his character motivation, protecting his friends from the crushing wheel of fate. Subsequently, following this character motivation, he topples many enemies and their ideologies. He shows them a facet to the cycle which is dependent on the strength of mind and will. The most delicious part of this writing is Aizen's inclusion. Aizen understands full and well that strength is one way to usurp the repugnancy of the world. He looks forward and outward for strength entirely capable of cutting down anyone to fuel his ideal world. Aizen does not have bonds that shackle him to the cycle, so he looks to destroy it for reasons completely unrelated to Ichigo's. Ichigo looks to keep his friends safe from the cycle and make them independent of fate's forces. Aizen looks to remove the world itself and replace it with himself at the top. I find it so interesting that Ichigo has the most screen time in writing, with the espadas that are most connected to Aizen, those being Ukiura, Grimmjow, and Notiura. These espadas show Aizen's depression toward the world he lives in, while also hoping to destroy it entirely and prompt up his own world. Ironically, two espada that contrast and reflect Aizen Ichigo never meets, those being Baragon and Stark. The thematic purpose behind this is linked to Ichigo himself. Ichigo views Aizen as the king among kings, even through their battle and later relationship. He also is the one to make Aizen finally connect with others through the Zanpakuto. This kinglyhood and loneliness are entirely dispelled and gratified through Ichigo. They are so entirely linked to Aizen, Ichigo not meeting these two important characters to Aizen is inconsequential because he has already saw them firsthand. However, the nihilism, despair, anger, and destruction are things he has to learn for himself. With no exaggeration, Ichigo is the only person to understand Aizen. Aizen is entirely multifaceted, and the uniqueness of the situation builds such a compelling character. I use the vagueness of the world to spell out Aizen's motivations. Truthfully, there's always been a vagueness about his motivations, but they are entirely linked to fate as always. Aizen is trying to become the embodiment of fate that he manipulates others to see him as. He's trying to become the moon itself. Aizen has consistently tried to manipulate the perceptions of others to be untouchable and unreachable. However, we the audience understand he is as reachable as anyone. He also wishes to touch the moon and step out onto the cliff's edge. He wishes for fearlessness to be compared to something beautiful. Instead, he's only recognized as a monster, a manipulator, a maniac. This dynamic is especially interesting with Ichigo, who does not believe what Aizen says. His manipulation attempts and long soliloquies are immediately squandered. Ichigo may view him as the moon, but he never views him as unreachable, one of the most important distinctions for the relationship. Ichigo and Aizen collectively go through many dips and dives through their time on screen. The main reason why characters are so interesting is because of their intrinsic flaws and trials they go through. Ichigo and Aizen are entirely anomalies within this world. This inherent difference is ironically linked to these character flaws and trials I mentioned just a minute ago. Ichigo was born exceptionally different and subsequently bred his most traumatic moment. For Aizen, his natural prowess prevented others from connecting with him and seeing his perspective on things. Another facet of this intrinsic worth and spiritual ability is their evolution during this arc, not only as characters but literally within their own spiritual ability. Mugetsu Ichigo is one of the most well thought out transformations in history. This is a combination of all of Ichigo's ability. Him being unaware of this is the fatal flaw that he corrects later on during his confrontations with Yuha. Yuha is actually intimately connected to this form. We see this explored literally within the design itself. Ichigo has long black hair and red eyes, a one-to-one with Yuha. It is very interesting that Ichigo obtained black hair during this form by itself. Ichigo's orange hair is what made him such a delinquent. People pick on him simply because of the way he looks. As a result, he gets bullied often. This new form gets rid of that, but also gets rid of what made Ichigo himself and what gave him such a special connection to his mother. This dichotomy is the thematic fuel for this transformation. By using Mugetsu, Ichigo loses. He won the fight but is nowhere closer to self-understanding. That's the point of deicide. Becoming God will only get you killed. More specifically, trying to touch God, touch the moon in the wrong way will only leave you falling down like the unenlightened monkey. The message here is clear. One can only achieve enlightenment through self-understanding. Aizen is a parallel to this in quite an explicit fashion. Aizen's transformations give him more spirit energy, as well complements his techniques, but it literally turns him into a monster. I've spoken about this previously, but Aizen's transformation is the thematic representation of stagnation versus evolution. His evolution is simply the wrong thing to do. Evolution is often depicted like this. Evolution at best will destroy who you are, and at worst will only keep you in the same place. This is why these developments and transformations are so important. They showcase such a fundamental part of Bleach's thematic framework. Moreover, it ties together just how weak mentally both of these characters are. As I said earlier, the point of deicide argues what is one supposed to do when the strength they have cannot overcome the hurdle you're faced with. Aizen's character is entirely a testament to this. Despite achieving transcendence, becoming effectively immortal, and having the ultimate Shikai ability, he still did not succeed. It was not because of a simple Kido spell from someone who could not perceive his Ryatsu. It was because of his own mental inhibitions. If Aizen was mentally stronger, he would not have lost in the way he did. But to be frank, if he was mentally stronger, perhaps his motivations would not be those as we saw. Aizen said he will ascend to far greater heights. The dramatic irony in this is that Aizen right here is not only admitting that Ichigo is stronger than him, but is also doing the same thing as Ichigo did internally. Ichigo lost his powers due to his internal struggle, and Aizen was sealed for the exact same reason, further hammering home this dynamic for the 20 millionth time. Have you ever thought about why Ichigo does not hate Aizen, why he works together with him and seemingly doesn't hold any contempt or bad blood the same way Toshiro, Renji, and Shinji do? Fairly obviously, Aizen was working with Shinji and Toshiro for like a century, so they do have a bit of a reason. Ichigo has a reason to harbor resentment toward Aizen. Aizen was going to kill Ichigo's friends just to toy with him, as well kill Rukia right in front of him. So why doesn't he hate him? Outside of having a lot of empathy and understanding towards his enemies, Ichigo realized something about Aizen. He was born into a circumstance in which he could not connect with others simply as a product of his birth. This is literally Ichigo. I mentioned the hair color earlier because it is surprisingly important. Ichigo being born with orange hair limited his relationship and annexed him in school. Moreover, being born with the ability to see ghosts turned him into a freak by his peers. He never had resentment toward his environment, but always carried it out internally. This detail further fleshes out this dynamic during deicide. One evolves internally, while the other takes the extreme approach of projecting his doubts onto an entire world, albeit a broken one. With this layer of their dynamic established, this layer of course being Ichigo suffers the same as Aizen with his spiritual ability and natural born difference toward everyone else, we can easily see these characters as parts of the same whole, sides of the same coin. This parallel is expertly shown and further developed through these characters' Zanpakuto. We should all be entirely familiar with the Zanpakuto and how it is a mirror to the Shinigami's soul, or quote-unquote heart. The Zanpakuto reflects things the wielder does not acknowledge or is even aware of. We see this within Soifon and Mayuri surprisingly. Soifon refuses to acknowledge her emotional, explosive side as it is not becoming of the person she wants to be. Mayuri does not play by his natural adaptive side, instead opting to be like Kisuke and have 200 plans ready. In the case of deicide, Ichigo Zangetsu translates to slaying moon. Aizen's Kyokusui translates to mirror flower water moon. If you're one of these idiots, then you'll see the moon connection and just stop there. Instead, digging deeper finds the moon being entirely intimately connected to the series, in which we can see in even deicide. I've mentioned this earlier, understand what the moon aims to be. I will play a small clip from a previous video to help illustrate this. Moons are an integral part of Bleach that many will shrug off. Moons are the ultimate symbol of cycles and the lack of enlightenment that many characters face. Moons appear to us, those far beyond it without the power to grasp it, as ever changing and stuck in a permanent cycle. Characters will try to soar past the moon, desperately trying to reach that place only to be further abused. Ichigo's Zanpakuto being slaying moon is entirely deliberate. He acknowledges fate, the cycle, and his powerlessness and looks for strength. Ichigo looks at the moon and resolves to touch it and admonish what it represents. Aizen, however, does not believe he can touch such a thing. He aims to touch such a thing but only delegates himself to a pawn on the board who cannot. We see this not only with his motivation to become the moon and manipulate others to hold his perception of him, but we also see this within his Zanpakuto. Mirror flower water moon is a reference to the Chinese proverb and idiom, flower seen in the mirror, moon reflected on the water's surface. This phrase directly means something that is beautiful but unattainable, something that has an ephemeral disposition that can only be admired but never grasped. Aizen likens the moon to something that can't be obtained, can't be touched, but is something beautiful by itself. Not traditional beautiful considering his motivations, but something to be idealized. The main connection here is how Ichigo and Aizen both want to go beyond the cycle, but their mentalities shape their drastically different motivations. Ichigo believes the moon can be touched as he tries to protect his friends. Aizen believes the moon cannot be touched unless you become the moon itself and stand eye to eye with the cycle. Kyokusui is an ability to manipulate others to hold Aizen in this god position and identify him as the moon. This is furthermore why Nochiura as a character is so important. If all the Espada are mirrors to Aizen, Nochiura Ichigo's obsession with the moon and to soar past it while also being the literal embodiment of it is a crazy detailed and well written parallel. This again adds to why Ichigo only fought certain espadas. Ichigo fought and defeated certain espadas that reflect certain ideas that Aizen is vulnerable to and tries to ignore. This is why Ichigo was stronger than Aizen at the end. Ironically, Ichigo took Aizen's own words. Ichigo did not stop at the cliff's edge, but instead moved entirely forward with fearlessness onto the emptiness following the beauty. This dynamic is entirely so weird to discuss because of how many thematic parallels, literal parallels, and connections you can draw throughout the entire series. Ichigo sits with Kisuke and talks about telling his friends the truth of his circumstance when he goes back home. Ichigo briefly looks happy at the results. Kisuke tells him he saved his friends, the Soul Society, and likely the world. Why does he look so sad? He affirms his decision of doing the right thing. Ichigo then asks Kisuke for the truth. Did the Hogyoku really reject Aizen? If the Hogyoku could really read the hearts of those around it? If that is the case, Aizen probably wanted to lose his powers. Ichigo only felt loneliness from Aizen's sword. If he was born with superior spirit powers, connecting with others must have been impossible. Maybe he was looking for someone who could see something from his perspective, and when that finally happened, he wished he could just be another Soul Reaper. The amazing parallel between Aizen and Ichigo is right here. In both their hearts, they wish they can be something they currently cannot. Aizen gains his first bond while Ichigo loses his as well. For both of these men, it is a silent victory. Deicide is a complex, climactic finale exploring the broken identities of these men. Deicide literally means the killing of God. Naturally, this seems super fitting because of Aizen and how he projects himself as God. The most clever writing here is linked to how this is related to Gin, Aizen, and Ichigo. For Gin, it is quite literal. His Bankai literally means God killing spear. He attempted to beat God, however in this case he was just another monkey falling into the water, unable to grab the moon. This is why he projects himself onto Ichigo and relinquishes his own goal onto him. For Aizen, he represents as God quite literally. His own words and role in the final arc all connect him to this figure. Ironically, it is only that, a figure. He lacks the ability to ascend to that divine realm due to his own insecurities and inhibitions. This misstep is shown within his poem. All monkeys are imitations of humans. All gods are imitations of people. He internally likens gods to be no different from the unenlightened. This is precisely what he is, unenlightened. This is how Ichigo comes in. Ichigo appears to be enlightened and transcendent. However, this is the falsified development. Ichigo had to abandon an intrinsic part of himself in order to achieve this. Functionally, this makes him no different from Aizen. Only real difference is that Aizen hid his innermost self away while Ichigo went inside, acknowledged it, and betrayed it. The final connection I will draw is just how intimately connected and well structured this entire stretch is. The two most prominent and well developed themes of Bleach are as follows. When plagued by death, one must pick up the pieces and move on. However, while moving on, it is imperative to self-actualize and understand yourself to build a better future. As I have said, and will continue to say, Ichigo is the black sun that shines a light upon these themes entirely. How this is done is through Gin and Aizen. Gin could not pick up the pieces from his relationship with rangiku and thereby molded the broken pieces into shackles which held him in place to his past. Aizen himself cannot move forward and meaningfully self-actualize for his future. Both of these antagonists demonstrated the series' biggest themes and how they failed to understand them. It is Ichigo who had to reprimand and admonish these failures. Alright, thank you so very much for watching. This has been a very long video in terms of editing, in terms of everything. And if we are here at the end, I have nothing but respect for you, and make sure to share this video to other Bleach fans and the like. This video has taken a little bit of time just because of the writing process. I've been loving making it, but the writing has been really iffy. And I love Bleach, and this will not be my last video, so subscribe if you're interested in that. And I cannot believe some people have the goal to say Bleach has no depth and it's worse than something like Naruto. Don't even talk about Naruto. Don't talk about any of the fucking trash 3 around me, because Bleach just slams them boys badly. Alright, I have tons of videos planned, but I'm only ever motivated to work on them when it's convenient for me. I have 1.5 Avatar videos written, I have a Korra video written, I have a huge Attack on Titan video planned, I have a Sopranos video planned, I have half a script for Adventure Time written, another Adventure Time video planned, a final JJK video planned with like 1/4 of the way written, a Death Note prologue video that is like half written. I have a Death Note prologue video written that is just a prologue to my 60-page Death Note video that is only half written right now. And finally, a Wano critical diatribe that is definitely coming out around 2027. My videos aren't some god tier quality, but I like to make them watchable and not have any flaccid editing, so a lot of these videos are going to take me a couple months. Thankfully, I have stopped playing video games and the like. I kind of just quit video games. So these videos are going to be coming out a lot more often because, you know, this is going to be my main hobby now. I want to make some goated videos for some people to enjoy as well as myself. That's the main reason why I make videos, primarily just so I can watch them, as corny as that sounds. My next big video will be Attack on Titan related. So yeah, stay tuned for more Haxiyama slander if you're interested.
We got good and bad news. Good news, we got your payment, buddy. Bad news, they gave you life. Sayonara.